So I spent a decade writing one book, and that's this book right here, Aurora and Luna. I spent a decade on this book. Now, common writing and publishing and business advice warns against getting stuck perfecting one book. So do I regret my time spent? Let's talk about it. So this video is going to be a cozy chit-chat featuring a delicious lavender lady grey latte. A chit-chat about the decade that I spent working on Aurora and Luna, which is this book right here and also these three books right here, because if you don't already know, I originally released Aurora and Luna as a trilogy. I did that over the course of 2024 and 2025, and now in 2026 I am re-releasing the book as one full book, as the one full book it was always meant to be. I always wrote it to just be one book, and in this video we're going to talk about everything I went through as I worked on this book, the highs and the lows, the lessons that I learned, the journey that I went on as I wrote about Aurora's journey across New Camelot. Now, before we get into the meat of the video, I just want to mention that getting stuck on one book, getting stuck writing one book, that can definitely be a trap. So I in no way want to minimize that by making this video. For me, however, I do think working on this one book, always coming back to it, and always improving it throughout the course of a decade, I think that was the right choice for me as a writer, and perhaps more importantly for me as a human. So let's rewind my life all the way back to the spring of 2015. I had just finished my first year of college. I had studied a variety of topics. I was pursuing a psychology degree, but I had studied a variety of courses, as you do in your first year of study. And one of the courses that I was allowed to study was an English literature course that specifically focused on Arthurian legend. And I had always been fascinated by Arthurian legend. It just intrigued me. And my mom was telling me that I should take this other academic writing strategies course so that I could learn how to write good papers and get good grades. But me, having the impulsive and passionate spirit that I do, I was like, hell nah, I'm gonna take this Arthurian Legends course instead. And that course, coupled with the poli-sci course that I took, and the sociology course that I took, and all of the psychology courses that I took, as well as the fact that I was, for the first time, playing Oblivion and just loving it and just getting sucked right into it. Oh, and also I was reading The Hunger Games for the first time, watching the movies for the first time. All of these influences, as unrelated as they might seem, they were all ping-ponging in my brain, and I was on summer break from school. I had a lot of idle time to just daydream and think and meander and dilly-dally. And I remember walking from the kitchen to the dining room of my parents' house and just suddenly getting this big download of an idea that was the Sun and Moon Saga and the world of New Camelot. It just all came at once. I was like, I need to write a fantasy novel. And this fantasy novel, it's going to be set in a world where there's just as much wealth hoarding as there is in our world, but instead of it being a hoarding of wealth, it's going to be a hoarding of magic. And all of a sudden, all of these ideas were coming to me, characters were coming to me, plot points were coming to me, and world building ideas were coming to me, and it all just came in this big, overwhelming flood of ideas that I did not know what to do with. I had written things before, I've been writing since I was a little kid, but I had never gotten such a big idea. The way my projects would go before this is I would start writing them, I would kind of run out of ideas, or just the excitement for the ideas that I did have would just kind of dwindle, and then I would just lose motivation and just stop writing because, you know, YouTube was more interesting than writing. And it wasn't that I didn't love writing, or at least that I didn't want to love writing. I did really enjoy it and I did really want to love it, but I just hadn't felt that click yet. And this was the first time where I felt the click, and this is the first time where the ideas stuck with me for a long time, literally for like 11 years this year. So it felt pretty special. And I really wanted to write this book, but I just had no idea how because I just didn't have the skills yet. I didn't have the discipline yet. Now, I was picking my courses for the fall semester of 2015, and I needed a few electives, and creative writing was a course that I was able to take and use as an elective. And this seemed like just the perfect idea because not only could I knock out one of those electives that I needed for my psychology degree, but also I could maybe learn how to write a book. And that would be awesome because then I could finally get this idea that was living in my mind rent-free out onto the page, or in my case, onto the Pages document. But to my dismay, when I submitted some of the chapters that I had written over the course of the summer to my creative writing teacher that fall, she did not give me a good grade. She gave me, well, I guess it was an okay grade. She gave me a C+, but to me, I was like a straight A student in college. To me, a C+ was basically like getting an F. So I was like, more importantly though, she didn't really give me any tangible feedback. So I didn't really know how to make it better. So this went on, me submitting her a chapter and her giving me what I considered to be a bad grade. Each time I would try to guess how I could make it better, but she just didn't really like what I was giving to her, and I kept wondering, am I just like a bad writer? So eventually I just wrote some random story that I didn't really care about, that I thought she would like. I did this just to try to improve my grade in the class because I didn't want my GPA to tank just because of this creative writing class. And lo and behold, this assignment that I wrote that I didn't really care about, that I had written just to kind of please her, she gave me an A. So I continued to do that for the rest of the class. And I basically just tucked my idea that I was actually passionate about away and just kind of ignored it. I assumed that her opinion was fact and that was all there was to it. It just wasn't good. But the idea kept pestering me and poking me and prodding me and nudging me and begging me to tell it. And so by the summer of 2017, that siren call of the Sun and Moon Saga, she could no longer be ignored. I was hypnotized all over again. I just had to start writing. I just felt this urge to write the story, and so I just got started, and I just told myself, look, it might be bad, it might be awful, it might be terrible, but it might also be salvageable. You've never written a book before, you've just written short stories, and most of those short stories were written before the age of 18. Like, you've never really seriously, as an adult, sat down and tried to write a novel. You've given it a try here or there, but you've never seen it past the first couple of chapters. You've always kind of just given up. And this time, let's not give up. Let's push through. Let's learn how to be a writer. Let's learn how to write. I basically just told myself the first draft is allowed to suck, but there will be seeds of good there. Clearly there are seeds of good there, because if there weren't, this idea wouldn't be pestering you the way it is and the way it has been for so long. And it just gave me the willingness to get started. And it was scary because I didn't really know how this was gonna go, and if it was gonna be any good, and if it was gonna be worth my time or just a total waste of my time. But I just didn't really care because the book, the story, the characters, the world, it was all calling to me like a siren song, hypnotic and just enchanting, and I just kind of got infected by this disease of my own mind, and I just had to write the book. That doesn't mean it wasn't hard to get the words down sometimes, but I think, yeah, that's like the first lesson that I learned as a writer through writing Aurora and Luna, was that the first draft is allowed to suck. The first draft is allowed to suck. The first draft is allowed to suck. And that's really the only way I could overcome writer's block. Another thing that had held me back for so long was pressuring myself to come up with an outline, and I had to get that perfect outline before I could start drafting. And yeah, I basically just had to go for it. Just start writing, just figure it out as I went, and just allow it to be bad on that first draft, because a badly written novel is better than no novel being written. And it's a bit counterintuitive, but yeah, I hear from so many people who want to write a book that they just can't find the inspiration, they just can't find the motivation, or they just don't know what to write, and it's like, you just gotta sit down and write. It's almost like having a meditation practice or going to the gym. Most days you're not gonna really want to do it, at least not until you get doing it. But then when you get doing it, like at least for me, once I get doing it, it's hard to pull me away. Especially when I was drafting Aurora and Luna, it became hard to pull me away. At first, the going was slow, but as I got more and more in the flow of writing, I just got more and more addicted to the high of being in the flow. I think I wrote about half of the first draft in 1 month because I just got so into it. And I also had like no responsibilities at the time. Like I wasn't working. I just basically had the book and a relationship, and that was really all I needed to do in my life. So it was easy to take that month and just write from dawn to dusk. But still, like, you know, I was some of those days I did 10,000 word days, which is that's a lot of words. So that was the first lesson that I overcame, was I just had to get over the fear of getting started, and I just had to allow the first draft to be messy. But then of course comes lesson number 2, or phase number 2 of the project, and that was the developmental edit, and that was a multi-year long phase. I spent longer developmentally editing the book than I did writing it, because I think I wrote the book in about 8 months' time, give or take, but I spent several years developmentally editing it. What that means, at least for me, what it meant was a lot of rewriting, a lot of rearranging things, rearranging plot points, a lot of developing my ideas, developing the characters, developing the world, developing the plot, working on the pacing, taking care of plot holes, adding in scenes, taking out scenes. Basically, surgery. I that's not my word. It was another YouTuber that I was watching, I can't remember who, but they called the developmental edit surgery, and that is what I did for, like, let's see here, 2018, 2019, and 2020. I was doing surgery for those 3 years. It was really hard. There were times when I genuinely didn't know whether or not this book would ever make it, because there would just be these huge plot holes or these huge glaringly obvious problems, and I didn't know how to fix them. And it wasn't like little things that you can kind of like sweep under the rug. It was like big things. And I was like, I don't know how to do this. Or another thing was like just not knowing how to write something effectively. Like it wasn't necessarily always a big plot hole, but sometimes it would just be like, this just isn't having the effect that I want it to have. Why isn't it having the effect that I want it to have? And just like rewriting and rewriting and rewriting. So that was phase 2 of bringing Aurora and Luna into fruition. Man, that feels like a whole lifetime in and of itself. Like I feel like that could be its own video, the developmental edit, but we only have so much time here. So I'm gonna move on to the line edit. Now this is where things got really hard, honestly. Like the developmental edit, I would say that those edits were more essential to the story, absolutely. Whereas the line edit is more about the aesthetics of the book. And by that I don't mean like the cover, I just mean like how it reads. The line edit is where I do like a really thorough, detailed, nitpicky edit to the prose to try to make it as pleasant and enjoyable and smooth of a read as possible. Even though you would think the developmental edit would be harder, and it was hard, but it was fun. The line edit was like, oh man, that was like a dark night of the soul, because there were just things in my writing, bad habits that sometimes I'm still trying to break, that I had to learn how to identify and understand why those things are not necessarily always the ideal way to tell a story, but then also learn how to fix. And it was just really eye-opening. I feel like this is where I really started to understand the medium of writing on a whole new level. Because before, you know, like, I was thinking about story in terms of story, and I wasn't necessarily thinking about the medium through which I was telling stories or consuming stories. I was just kind of thinking a story is a story is a story. But the reality is, like, telling a story through a book versus a movie versus a video game versus a piece of music versus a YouTube video where I'm telling you a story, those are all totally different mediums. So this is where I really honed in on the craft of writing in and of itself. Not just storytelling, but writing. The reason why this was so hard, I think, is because, well, number one, it's more technical, whereas a developmental edit is a little bit more subjective. I mean, you could argue they're both technical and you could argue they're both subjective, but I think a developmental edit is a little bit more subjective to your tastes and your ideal reader's tastes, whereas a line edit, it is that, but it's also you're learning the craft of writing. And, you know, honestly, this is where I was starting to get feedback outside of like my inner circle. I was working with an editor and they gave me feedback that was very, very good feedback, and I'm so grateful I got it. But it also did kind of sting to get it, because this was probably the first real feedback that I was getting on my writing. What I was learning about my writing was that the prose needed work and that my book needed a round of line editing. And it was just really hard to hear that, because before that I thought, okay, I've got the story down, we're ready to go, we're ready to publish. But to hear that I wasn't ready yet, that was hard. I could have taken that feedback and just been like, never mind, I guess I'm not a good enough writer, I'm never gonna publish, blah, blah, blah. But instead I was like, okay, how can I use this to make myself an even better writer? How can I use this to level up? And I'm not trying to say that I'm like some masterful writer that has no flaws and nothing to work on. I will always be working on this craft. This is what my entire life is about, is storytelling and writing. But I know that my writing has really up-leveled in a lot of ways throughout these last few years, but particularly in my prose. And I know that's been from me writing a lot, self-editing a lot, getting a lot of feedback on my work, working with editors, reading a lot, really analyzing the writing that I'm reading and really thinking about the writing on a very technical craftsman level, and just working really, really hard on my prose to make it enjoyable to read. Because the thing is like, while the story is probably the most important part, clunky prose or lackluster prose or whatever problem you're having with your prose, the prose is the vessel through which the reader experiences the story. So like, if the prose isn't enjoyable to read, the reader can't even enjoy the story. And I know, since I've started really thinking critically about my prose and about other people's prose, I know that now sometimes I'm reading a book and I'm enjoying the story, but then sometimes lackluster prose can get in the way of me enjoying that story. So one of the main things that I did to really work on my prose and also to just give my book that line edit that it needed was I really tried to ground the reader in the senses. I started to describe a lot more sensory detail and not just visuals. I feel like as writers sometimes we default to visuals, but sounds, smells, textures. I really tried to throw the reader more into the world so that it could feel like they were really in Aurora's shoes, really there in New Camelot, living her adventure, rather than just telling the reader what's happening. That's the biggest change I had to make when it came to my line edit. Dramatizing more than I was narrating. Now, I actually really love narrating, and when it's done well, but I was doing telling more than showing, and I wasn't always doing telling effectively. When I started to work on this show don't tell problem, my writing really evolved and became something that I was genuinely so proud of, and not just like, I think it's good. Like, I like it because, you know, I liked the story and I liked the characters and I liked the world, but it became something where I was like, okay, I can feel that I'm developing this craft. And so even though that was a really hard period of time, this would have been late 2021 all the way into 2022, it was like a very intense 6 months that I was working on this line edit for Aurora and Luna. Very intense 6 months. Other than working, that was like the only thing I was doing. I was single at the time, wasn't doing music at the time, really was just working and writing, and that was it. Work, write, sleep, repeat. In that 6 months, my book really evolved into something that I was like, okay, I think I'm ready to publish. Now, this is where there's going to be a little bit of a gap, because for a while I was pursuing traditional publication, but eventually I pivoted and went for indie publishing, which is what I am now. I am an indie author, and these are independently published books. But I'm gonna talk about that in more detail in a future video, so stay tuned, subscribe, hit the notification bell. We'll just jump ahead to when I had already decided that I was going to independently publish. This is where I had to do some serious copy editing, some serious proofreading. This was when I really had to turn the book into like a product that I was comfortable selling to you. Because this is where, you know, I had to clean up any typos and deal with any misspellings or any punctuation issues. And oh my god, at this point in time, I think I learned so much about when to use a comma, when to use a semicolon, because before that I felt like I was always guessing. This is when I don't want to say I really learned how to do it, because I feel like I'm still learning, and I feel like it's still such a gray area thing when to use a comma and when not to use a comma. Like, it's not like math, right? Like, it tries to be like math, but it's not like math. There is a degree of style and writer's intent that goes into it as well. But I feel like through my copy edit, I really did learn, okay, this is kind of how I like to use the rules of writing. And this is when I like to use a comma, this is when I like to use a semicolon. And I just really cleaned my writing up. And then I started to publish and market and promote. And that's where we are today. And oh my god, publishing and marketing and promoting, that's like its own entity. I did get better at formatting and publishing books through releasing my book as a trilogy before releasing the big book. So learning how to publish well, that's been its own whole thing that I don't have time to get into here. Learning how to market and promote, I mean, that's a full-time job. That's a whole thing that I'm still very much learning. I really hope that I am doing Aurora and Luna justice this time around with the re-release. And I guess that brings me to the end of the video, because that brings me to where I am today, holding this book that I worked on for literally a decade. And on May 1st, it'll be available for you to purchase and read. And this edition has a cover that was illustrated by me. Yeah, I'm so proud of this book. I talk more about some of the tropes and some of the things you can expect in reading Aurora and Luna in the other video that I posted last week. So check that out if you haven't already. But this was 10 years work, this book. It was 10 years work, and I guess getting back to the original question of the video, do I regret spending a decade on this book? No. Hell no. This is so important to me. This project is so important to me, and I'm so glad that I had the courage to push through even when things looked dark and unpromising, even when I was getting feedback on my writing that I didn't want to get, even when I was getting rejected by publishers. I am so grateful that I pushed through and saw this through to completion and published it in a way that I feel good about, with a cover that I illustrated, with maps that I illustrated. I don't regret spending a decade on this at all. But here's the thing. This isn't the only thing I've done in this last decade. I have written 4 other books, 5 if you count The Solar Queen, the sequel, but before writing The Solar Queen and before publishing this, I wrote 4 other books, all of them totally unrelated to the Sun and Moon Saga. I wrote in multiple genres and styles. I wrote a horror novel. I wrote a coming-of-age novel that was told through epistolary form. It was told through the girls' journal entries. I wrote a nonfiction book. It was a collection of essays, but they all kind of tied together into one larger narrative. And I also wrote a portal fantasy book. I tried writing in multiple styles, in multiple genres, because everyone was saying, don't get stuck on one book, make sure you try other things, blah, 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 blah. If you're a writer, you've probably heard that advice before too. And I'm not saying it's bad advice. It is good advice. I am glad that I wrote all those other books. They all taught me something different that I can now apply to the Sun and Moon Saga as I continue to write the series. And I'm probably going to talk about that in a different video. We'll leave a pin in that for later. But the thing is, you only live once. If there's a story you really want to tell, or if there's a kind of music you really want to make, or if there is something you really want to do, I don't know, maybe you really want to climb Mount Everest, I don't know you. If you have that yearning to do something, something special to you, you just gotta do it, And I know that sounds really overly simplified, and I know that that's not always the best advice all the time for every single person. Please take what I'm saying with a pinch of salt. Be smart, be strategic, but at the same time, if you get an intuitive nudge to go and do something, be it climbing Mount Everest, or be it writing a fantasy series, or be it making a video game, I don't know. If you just get that intuitive nudge to go and do something, you gotta do it. You gotta do it. You gotta listen to that part of you, because when you don't listen to yourself, when you don't listen to your intuitive nudges, man, that's when your soul starts to die. And I know for myself, when I wasn't listening to this, when I was trying to run away and do other things, even when I was writing other books and enjoying writing those other books, because I love writing no matter what I'm writing. But even when I was writing those other books and enjoying writing them and, happy that my writing was improving, there was still just this part of me that just really wanted to write this. It wasn't until I got back to writing this, until then, I didn't feel okay. And it felt like I was slowly dying on the inside. And when I started working on this series again, that's when I felt like I was being reborn. So I don't regret spending a decade on this book. I'm confident that if you love character-driven quest fantasy, character-driven epic fantasy, I'm confident if you love those things that you will enjoy it. So it's available for pre-order now. The links are in the doobly-doo. I would love it if you picked a copy up. At the end of the day, I write for me, and this is what I want to write right now. I just feel like I have to write it. And it feels really good to be able to stick with something for 10 years, for over 10 years now, and to be able to consistently come back to it and improve it and refine it and mature it and move it in different directions, and just to keep coming back to something and to keep improving it and to keep improving myself as I keep coming back to it and improving it. I know that through these 10 years, I have improved as a writer, I have improved as a storyteller, and even if this series never finds an audience, although I do think it can find an audience, but even if it never does, I still think I've gained a lot through spending so much time on it, and yeah, I don't regret spending a decade on it. Okay. I am going to close this video by reading you a review of Aurora and Luna. The Sun and Moon Saga is an engrossing read. It's a tale of magic, adventure, and personal struggle. Melody really paints a picture in the reader's mind without ever bogging us down with rambling passages that distract from the storytelling. The tone strikes a balance somewhere between the whimsy of Disney and the darkness of a Grimm's fairy tale. While it's not exactly a bedtime story for kids, It is appropriate for readers 12 and up and would be perfect for a high school library. I highly recommend it. That's such a nice review. Thank you so much. And yeah, and if that sounds good to you, if you want a coming of age quest fantasy epic, then please check out Aurora and Luna. She goes live May 1st, Beltane, and she's available for pre-order now. All the links are in my description. If you would like to start reading the Sun and Moon Saga today, then click the link in my description to join my free newsletter, and when you do, you will receive The Misfit Princess, which is about the first quarter of Aurora and Luna, in your inbox, absolutely free, so you can start reading it today if you want to, and you can start reading it and see if Aurora and Luna is the right read for you. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon. I'm going to be releasing a video every single week for the next couple of months to promote Aurora and Luna, and if you would like to support my writing as well as this YouTube channel and my illustration and my music and just all the creative work that I do, then you can sign up for the Lunar Coven, which is my Patreon and my Substack. It's the same content on both, and basically there I post behind the scenes stuff, I post sneak peek early bird stuff, like for example this cover was posted 2 months ago, long before I ever shared it publicly. There's exclusive videos there, stuff like that. So if you really love the Sun and Moon Saga and you want to support my creative work, that's a great place to be. And I think that is about everything. So I hope to see you in New Camelot, and until the next video, stay cozy.